Good morning, Impression Hall. It is a Wednesday, the second day of July, bringing you Morning Matters because your mornings matters. Get to the stories that matter today. Tighter rules for online gambling, such as stricter age verification and higher minimum bets, are being pushed for by Senator Win Gatchalian. The senator, however, clarified that the measure does not call for a total ban. Manila Mayor Isko Moreno announced a state of financial crisis, blaming the previous administration's alleged mismanagement for leaving the city in financial ICU. Moreno disclosed that Manila faces more than 10 billion pesos in unpaid obligations, which he said has crippled the city's basic services. And authorities continue to investigate the case of missing sabongeros. A key question remains: were their bodies disposed of in Taal Lake? Let's discuss this matter later in the program. Welcome to our program, Morning Matters, where we talk about the issues you need to know for the rest of your day. Now, first on the agenda, former Senator Francis Tolentino has been barred from entering China and its special administrative regions, a sanction he calls a badge of honor. Here is the report.
Former Senator Francis Tolentino is now banned from entering mainland China, Hong Kong, and Macau. The ban was imposed directly by the Chinese government. According to China's Foreign Affairs Ministry, the sanction stems from Tolentino's alleged anti-China stance, which they claim harms China's interest and its relationship with the Philippines. But Tolentino says he won't be deterred. In a statement, Tolentino said he has fought and will keep fighting for what belongs to the Philippines. In fact, the former senator told One News's The Big Story that he considers China's sanction a badge of honor.
It's a badge of honor which I will carry because what I did was for the interests of the Filipino people. The Filipinos should be respected with dignity by other countries, no matter how big or small.
Tolentino was one of the senators who condemned China's harassment in the West Philippine Sea and initiated Senate probes into the issue. He also authored landmark territorial laws passed during the 19th Congress, the Philippine Maritime Zones Act and the Philippine Archipelagic Sea Lanes Act. In April, Tolentino also exposed a company in Makati that he claimed was funded by China to spread pro-China narratives and disinformation about the Philippines.
Those are not allegations. We have proof presented. I don't regret anything na nagawa ko kasi yung ginawa ko para sa Pilipinas.
For its part, the Department of Foreign Affairs said the sanction does not help ongoing efforts to repair Philippine-China bilateral ties. Senator Jinggoy Estrada, meanwhile, urged the DFA to summon the Chinese ambassador to the Philippines to explain Beijing's move against Tolentino.
Senator Win Gatchalian is pushing for tighter rules on online gambling, including stricter age limits and higher betting thresholds. Here is the story.
Senator Win Gatchalian has filed a bill seeking to tighten regulations on online gambling. However, the senator clarified that the measure, one of his 10 priority bills in the 20th Congress, does not call for a total ban to prevent gambling operators from going underground.
Pag tinotal ban, ang aking concern baka mag-underground sila. No? Kasi napakadaling mag-set up ng website.
Under the measure, the minimum age for players would be raised from 18 to 21. Age verification would require both a valid ID and biometric data. The bill also sets a 10,000 pesos minimum bet and a 5,000 pesos minimum wallet top-up. It prohibits linking e-wallets such as GCash to gambling apps.
Ngayon kasi pwede ka mag-GCash, ililink mo dito eh. Iyon ang nagiging napakadali na kasi. No? So, pinutol namin yung link na yan.
The measure further bans gambling sponsorships in public events and bars campaign donations from gaming entities. On a different note, Gatchalian emphasized that the Senate, sitting as an impeachment court, should hold off on further proceedings until the House of Representatives elects a new prosecution panel.
But insofar as the trial is concerned, we have to wait for the new prosecution team to be elected or to be nominated by the lower house. Because if you remember, the lower house ended the term last Monday, and they have not convened yet, and they have not yet elected their speaker. So there's no prosecution team yet under the 20th Congress.
He also clarified that senator judges from the 19th Congress don't need to retake their oath as the impeachment court is a continuing body. Gatchalian further confirmed that 3 senators, including Senator Amy Marcos, have expressed interest in the Senate presidency.
Tuwing may ganitong bagong kongreso, kasi tumawid tayo, talagang meron namang usapin na may mga gustong tumakbo bilang Senate President. Alam naman natin yung mga personalidad na gustong tumakbo, naririnig naman natin. So, yan ay pinag-uusapan ngayon.
The palace hits back at Vice President Sara Duterte's outburst over her foreign trips. Their response in this report.
Ang kakulangan po sa kaalaman sa batas, sa ethical standards ay hindi po maikukubli sa pagmumura o pang-iinsulto.
The word war between Palace Press Officer Undersecretary Claire Castro and Vice President Sara Duterte shows no signs of cooling, all sparked by questions over the latter's recent trips abroad. The palace fired back at VP Sara, who earlier called palace officials stupid for questioning the purpose of her trips to Malaysia and Australia. Castro pointed out that it was Duterte herself who said the trips were work-related. And if that's the case, Castro said, she's representing the country and the public deserves to know what exactly was accomplished. In her words, public office is a public trust. So if there's nothing to show for it, she said, maybe no work was done at all. The palace official did not stop there. She also drew a comparison to President Marcos.
Ang Pangulo, focus sa trabaho. Kapag po siya man ay umaalis ng bansa, may dalang magandang balita. May magandang naging relasyon sa iba't ibang leaders. Isa dito ay ang pagsagip sa buhay ni Mary Jane Veloso dahil sa magandang relasyon sa Indonesia. Ang pagpapauwi, ang pagpapabalik ng dating mamabatas na si Arnold Forteves. Pati na po ang mabilis na pababalik kay Alice Goo. At sa Japan, inaangat ang turismo ng Pilipinas.
According to Castro, these are the kinds of outcomes that should be reported if, quote, real work was done. The vice president has traveled twice to The Hague this year to visit her father, former President Rodrigo Duterte, who has been detained in the Netherlands since March. She also attended gatherings with overseas Filipino workers in Hong Kong, Qatar, Malaysia, and Australia. VP Sara had earlier denied claims of using taxpayers' money for her travels, saying she paid for her own airfare and accommodations. For News 5, Maricel Halili, We Are One News.
Malacanang said President Bongbong Marcos is studying whether a legislated wage hike could lead to layoffs, especially among small businesses. Palace Press Officer Undersecretary Claire Castro said the president is weighing its potential impact. On Monday, the NCR Wage Board approved a 50 pesos daily wage hike effective July 18. Now, that same day, lawmakers filed several bills seeking a legislated wage hike as the 20th Congress opened. Meanwhile, the Employers Confederation of the Philippines, or ECOP, supported the 50 pesos increase, saying it followed due process. ECOP noted that when combined with last year's 35 pesos hike and other benefits, the new wage would surpass the Senate-approved 100 peso hike. However, they urged greater focus on sectors more in need than minimum wage earners.
Muli pag-aaralan ito kung kakayanin ba talaga. Kasi kung magdudulot naman ito ng layoff dahil hindi kakayanin ng karamihang maliliit na mga negosyante, mas marami pong mahihirapang mga manggagawa dahil baka mawalan sila ng trabaho. Kaya po lahat ng ito ay pag-aaralan para sa ikabubuti po ng lahat.
Taon-taon, bibigyan natin yung, ina-address natin yung formal sector, yung minimum wage earner. 10% lang ang 52 million yan. Hindi yan ang manggagawa na talagang dapat i-address. Sino ba yung ibang manggagawa na taon-taon na argabyado? Na hindi naman sila better position like the minimum wage earners na sila naman ay talaga mga permanenteng trabaho niyan.
Manila Mayor Isko Moreno has declared a state of financial crisis in the capital city. In his first State of the City address on Tuesday, Moreno said Manila is in, quote, financial ICU with over 10.2 billion pesos in unpaid obligations. The mayor blamed alleged fiscal mismanagement by the previous administration, which he said left basic services crippled. Now, to address the shortfall, he created Task Force FACTS to lead reforms and enforce strict spending controls. Moreno also vowed to hold those responsible accountable while beginning what he called a financial healing for the city.
May gobyerno sa madaling araw, may gobyerno sa gabi, may gobyerno sa hapon, may gobyerno kahit holiday sa lungsod ng Maynila. Liwanag po mula sa matatag na suporta na ipinagkaloob ninyo sa akin. The people of Manila have granted me with a strong mandate to implement sweeping reforms. Tama naman. Dapat lang. Because we all share one dream to make Manila great again.
Don't go away. We'll be back with more stories after the break. Good morning, I'm Gretchen Ho, and here at Morning Matters, we talk about the most pressing issues and give you the context behind the headlines. The Philippine National Police says the case of the missing Sabongeros remains stalled due to lack of evidence. Authorities are still waiting for a sworn statement from alias Totoy, who earlier claimed that around 20 cops were involved in the disappearances. The PNP's Internal Affairs Services says they cannot file cases yet because the identities of the accused officers remain unknown. Totoy also alleged the missing cockfighters were dumped in Taal Lake. Earlier, the National Police Commission, or NAPOLCOM, launched a separate investigation into the alleged involvement of police in the crime.
Ay kailangan po lagyan ng sustansya. At ang sustansya po nito ay yung pong salaysay nitong bagong revelasyon ng bagong testigo na to, si alias Totoy. Kulang talaga ng mga corroborative evidence para maturo kung sino yung mga sangkot dito.
And for updates on the NAPOLCOM's probe, we have Vice Chairman and Executive Officer Rafael Vicente Carinisan. Welcome to Morning Matters. Welcome back.
Welcome back. Hi Gretchen at everyone, magandang umaga.
Okay, so the NAPOLCOM has been put in charge of this investigation into the police officers. What do we know so far?
None yet, Gretch. I'm being very candid. We just started with our investigation the other day. We ordered a motu proprio investigation due to the fact that left and right we've been hearing the involvement allegedly of policemen in the disappearance of the Sabongeros. So we are left with no choice but to investigate. But if I may say, we are still also awaiting for a copy of the affidavit of alias Totoy. And I agree partially with my contemporary in the IAS, Attorney Dulay, that without the complete affidavit of Totoy, it's going to be an uphill climb. But of course, I disagree in the sense that we have to do our homework, we have to do our a thorough investigation, and hopefully we get to see more evidence along the way.
Okay, what would be the jurisdiction of the NAPOLCOM as opposed to the IAS, the PNP Internal Affairs Service?
Well, let's put it this way. The National Police Commission under the Philippine Constitution is the one in charge of all policemen. So, ang police ng police, NAPOLCOM. Other entities or sub-entities under the National Police Commission. So the IAS is subsumed under the Philippine National Police, and the National Police Commission is in charge of all members of the Philippine National Police. We have coordinated with the PNP through the CIDG and General Tor himself. We are awaiting the investigation of the IAS. The IAS will not take cognizance of the case. They are helping investigate, and the IAS will file it with the National Police Commission in this case.
Okay. But the IAS has dismissed 7 cops, correct?
Yes.
Related to this issue.
So I've heard.
Oo, pero hindi ito dinaan sa NAPOLCOM.
Because the IAS can start their own investigation as well. The work product of the IAS, theoretically, is a recommendation to the Chief of the Philippine National Police, who acts on the recommendation of the IAS. Based on the decision of the Chief PNP, this is then brought to the National Police Commission on appeal. But this does not preclude the National Police Commission from acting on certain things motu proprio or on itself, by itself. So if the NAPOLCOM takes cognizance of a case, siya na yun. So hindi porket meron pang disciplinary authorities, Gretch, like say a mayor or pleb or IAS or Chief PNP, the NAPOLCOM does not have jurisdiction. Pag sinimulan na ng National Police Commission ng fact-finding or a case, then the National Police Commission has jurisdiction.
Kasi ang katanungan dito ay bakit administrative lamang yung naging resulta, no? Kung dismissal lang, were there not cases filed against these 7 cops who were dismissed? Walang kasong ganun?
I can't answer for the IAS, pero let's put it this way. Ang talagang in charge of filing cases is the prosecution service of the DOJ. So yung the National Police Commission, kaya we're investigating na, is we're looking into the administrative aspect of the case.
Okay.
So while we can file criminal cases as well, someone really has to look into the admin cases. Kasi may tumitingin na nung criminal.
So that's just the first step, in short.
Yes. Kumbaga, if yung sa Tagalog, yung criminal cases, himas rehas yan. sa admin cases, fitness to become a police officer. Ang napakahirap naman, Gretch, na may police tayo na allegedly involved. Tapos yung mga police na to still wearing the uniform, has a badge, and has a gun. So, kailangan nating simulan, imbestigahan, at hawakan na yung kaso. Kasi kung sila pa ay nasa serbisyo, if they are involved, dapat silang ma-dismiss. Kung sila ay inosente, then so be it. They be declared innocent.
How many cops are being investigated?
Honestly, I have already an idea, but siguro it's more prudent for me to wait for the DOJ's comment on this matter.
So wala pa. 20 kasi yung nasa balita namin.
Nasa balita. Actually, yung alam nyo, yun ang alam ko. Pero
So for now, what is their status? Are they still going to work every day? Or they have been put on preemptive suspension?
I leave that question to be answered by the Philippine National Police. I already gave my thoughts to the PNP. There should be a case filed as far as we are concerned. Currently, there is none. There's an investigation, fine, but currently we're still looking for evidence in other materials. So until and unless we find something substantial to hold them accountable or to preventively suspend them, as far as the NAPOLCOM is concerned, it's still the PNP's ballgame. So, General Torres...
Puntahan muna siguro natin si alias Totoy, no?
Yeah.
Paano ba siya biglang lumabas? I mean, this came out of nowhere. Him talking about, at the center of it, an expose, right? So, ano yun? Nakonsensya ba siya?
Hindi ko pa siya nakakausap. Ni isang page na affidavit niya, hindi ko pa nababasa. Pero ang pagkakaintindi ko dyan, and at least I think this is public knowledge, mukhang insider tong si Totoy eh. Mukhang meron na siyang mga kaso in the first place eh. And I think this is his way of seeking justice, not just for himself, but also to seek justice for those who have been victimized by this crime. I can't speak for him. I haven't met him. I don't know him. Pero ano yan eh, syempre, kanda ipit-ipit na sila eh. Ito na yung pagkakataon siguro na mabago niya ang history at he be on the right side of the things.
May update ba tayo doon sa Taal Lake, yung sa mga katawan na itinapon doon?
I heard from the good mayor of Laurel, who incidentally I'm from there, na may mga presence of law enforcers in the area. I'm aware that different law enforcement agencies are currently in Laurel, Batangas. As to the details of what they have found, I have an idea also, but of course, Gretch, patawarin nyo na ako. Hayaan na natin ang DOJ to mention whatever they have found there.
Speaking of those involved here, several people are in powerful positions. A senator and 2 congressmen have been tagged in the disappearance. Is it possible that that is the route we're going with this case?
What do you mean?
I mean, merong mga lumalabas na mas matataas na pangalan, kaya na-drag ang police because this is sabungan. Paano na dawit ang Philippine National Police, di ba?
Siguro, public knowledge siya since before, Gretch. I think, even if I ask you the same question, I'll be the interviewer here. If I ask you who these people are, I think you can answer. Masyado kasing ma-impluwensya at malaki itong kaganapan na ito. Tandaan natin, this happened in the context of a pandemic. Lahat ng tao walang trabaho, lahat ng tao hindi makaalis. Everyone was on their cell phones. Naghanap ng pagkakakitaan. And here it comes, merong isang laro, may sabong, na pwedeng pagkakitaan ng napakaraming tao. So, a lot of people got involved. So, hindi na ako nagtaka na allegedly may mga malalaking tao na nandyan. Posible na may involvement ang PNP. Sabi nga ni Totoy, may involvement ka sa pagkakawala. Pero ang ending nito is, yung mga involvement ng mga civilian na yan, ng mga malalaking taong yan, DOJ yan. Yung, kung sino man yung mga pulis na yan, yun ang hahabulin natin. Wala tayong pakialam, Gretch, kung sino man yung mga backer nila. Wala tayong pakialam kung sino yung mga malalaking tao na yan. Ang importante is, ma-identify natin itong mga pulis na to, makasuhan sila, maimbestigahan, makatulan para kung sakasakali involved sila, wala na sila sa servisyo.
2 names have popped up in online posts, and that is Gretchen Barreto, Atong Ang. Have their names popped up in the investigation?
Napakahusay mo magtanong, Gretch. objection leading. But siguro let's put it this way. Ulitin ko, I don't want to preempt any investigation or findings by the DOJ or even the National Police Commission or the PNP. I'll be a team player. Let them announce when it's ready to be announced. Pero as far as we're concerned, we will just do our thing and we will investigate and we will coordinate with all law enforcement agencies.
But essentially, this is because of game fixing and cheating.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Sa usaping kanto, tawag dyan chope. So kung sa pagsasabong, naglalabas ka ng isang manok na alam mo matatalo, tapos pupustahan mo yung kabila. So yun yung panonyope. So dahil dito, maraming nawawalan ng pera, maraming natatalo ng malaking pera. Siyempre, kung noon, sapakan lang sa maliliit na sabungan, ngayon, dahil since we're talking about millions and millions of pesos nationwide, theoretically, and I think that was the sentence imposed on them by whoever the persons or the group behind this are.
Speaking of another investigation, let's move on over to the ICC. The Justice Secretary has said the Philippine government has chosen not to pursue the war on drugs cases because we don't have anything. And we don't have a police report, we don't have a DNA analysis, we don't have ballistics. What does this mean for the NAPOLCOM? Are you on pause when it comes to all investigations? And totoo ba na wala tayong kahit ano?
Siguro magsimula tayo sa kailangan ba tayo mag-file ng mga kaso dito. Maybe magkakaroon ng issue legally as far as the principle of complementarity is concerned. Sa Tagalog, kapag meron ng may hawak na kaso locally, dapat din na hinahawakan dun sa ICC. So baka yun ang tack din ni DOJ Secretary para hindi magkaroon ng legal issues. No cases here, we hear all the cases abroad. Dun sa usapin na there is no material available, there might be some problems as far as availability. Kasi nangyari to in a different administration. I have to admit na mahihirapan. Pero hindi imposible. So that I want to stress, Gretch. I respect the DOJ, especially DOJ Secretary Rimulya, na talagang hirap. Pero we're taking on the challenge. Hindi imposible yan.
But could those records be submitted to the ICC instead? I mean, whatever you have. Pagdating sa mga pagtutulungan, no? Pagdating sa mga records na yon, at anong kailangan gawin kung hindi imposible?
Siguro let's put it in context. The National Police Commission is the one who has administration and control over the whole Philippine National Police. I'm just on my second month as the head of the National Police Commission. So siguro, Gretch, alam ko naman, kilala mo naman ako personal. Alam mo na diretso tayo. We are doing our homework here. Lahat ng dapat gawin, ginagawa natin. Yung mga kailangan silipin dito, sisilipin din natin. No fear or favor. So kung may kailangan tayong silipin na insidente, may kailangan tayong hanapin ng mga bagay-bagay, we'll look into it. And we will not sit idly by. I'll answer you that way.
Okay. But what would it take to have credible evidence? Because this has been long done. I mean, it was in the past administration where all of this happened. What can we hold on to? What pieces of evidence can we hold on to that we could trace to the actual crime?
Siguro mag-lecture tayo ng konti sa batas. May more or less dalawa yung klase ng ebidensya, Gretchen. Una, ito yung testimonial evidence. Ito yung testimonya ng tao. Yung testimonya ng pulis, kung sino man yun, ebidensya pa rin yun. So we're not just limited to object evidence o yung mga gamit. So itong magneto o yung whatever
o yung
na yan.
Crime scene, o yung mga litrato.
We're not just limited to that. These are still pieces of evidence. So contextually, kung wala man tayong direct evidence, meron tayong nakikitang circumstantial evidence na if taken holistically, there may be overwhelming circumstantial evidence warranting certain actions. So sabi ko nga, merong siguro pagkukulang ng konti dun sa object evidence, sa mga ilang dokumento, sa ilang mga bagay-bagay, pero meron pa tayong ibang ebidensyang maaring makalap as far as testimonial evidence is concerned. So, meron pa yan. Sigurado akong hindi ubos yung object evidence at sigurado akong may testimonial evidence.
Yung testimonial evidence, ilan yung kailangan para maging malakas? As many as possible?
As many as possible. The key phrase here, siguro in Philippine laws is concerned, is overwhelming circumstantial evidence. So I think it speaks for itself.
Okay, but for now, we are on pause when it comes to the investigations.
I cannot say that. Maybe as far as DOJ is concerned, there may be on pause. But as far as the National Police Commission is concerned, everything's live.
Okay, help us understand here what investigations have been done in the past. Kasi noong 2017, yung Supreme Court mismo yung humihingi ng mga records na yan. They were investigating the Tokhang or yung Oplan Tokhang, and humingi sila sa gobyerno nung mga number of deaths. Pero hindi sila binigyan ng drug-related deaths. So, nung kayo ay pumasok dito sa inyong posisyon, anong nakita ninyo? I mean, ano na yung nagawang yung mga investigasyon?
Yung totoo, honestly, sa National Police Commission, before my entry, wala.
Wala.
Wala. Yun ang totoong sagot.
Because that has been the point of contention here. Yung why cooperate with the ICC kung kaya naman natin mag-imbestiga dito, kung meron tayong mechanisms of justice, pero wala.
Nung panahon, before I entered, wala. Ibang usapan na pagpasok natin, Gretch. Di ko na madetali, mingi ako ng patawad sa'yo. Sabihin na lang natin na, again, kilala mo ko, and we are doing our homework, Gretch.
Okay. The Justice Secretary also said that about 3 or 4 witnesses are under the Witness Protection Program. Ano po ito? Mga bago ito?
I think they're old names. I think what the DOJ Secretary is saying is he is helping indirectly by protecting Filipinos whose lives are at stake. So let it be. I think that's a very noble act of the DOJ Secretary. So kung gusto niyang tulungan ng mga witnesses, as far as I'm concerned personally, tama yun. Kung anong ginagawa ni DOJ Secretary, let it be.
Have these families asked for protection? Not just when it comes to yung local investigations, pero yung ICC. Meron na bang humingi?
I would assume there would be. Because I don't think the DOJ Secretary would give protection if there is no request or if these people are not part of any investigation by the ICC. So I'm assuming that the DOJ Secretary knows something that all of us don't.
From your perspective, gaano kahirap yung internal cleansing na mangyari? Because also, I understand the conflict of interest. Pagdating kay Secretary Remulla, we're investigating police officers, but they should be the primary witnesses in this. Kaya naman sinabi niya sa ICC. Pero when it comes to internal cleansing na nabanggit ni General Marbil nung kanyang panahon at ni General Torre, paano kaya gagawin yun?
Una, kailangan natin ilatag yung premises. Una, partner natin si General Torre. Sobrang bilibaw sa taong yan. At usapang lalaki, isang salita yan. Doon sa aspetong internal cleansing as far as the National Police Commission is concerned, wala kami sasantuhin. So kung meron man kailangan silipin, imbestigahan, sino man yan, ang rango yan, ilan man yan, wala kami sasantuhin.
Ano yung kailangan mag-file ng case? Civilians could file.
Civilians could file. We can do motu proprio investigations also. Fine. Pero syempre, iba pa rin kapag may warm body complaining about something. Iba yun eh. Ito yung complaint ko, may affidavit na ako, ito yung ebidensya ko, imbestigahan niyo ito National Police Commission.
Siguro yung hesitation dito ng mga biktima, yung pambayad sa lawyer. I mean, they would have to get their own counsel for that.
Hindi kinakailangan. Yun ang gusto kong i-emphasize. In fact, yun ang ginawa natin sa pleb nung panahon na tayong hepe ng People's Law Enforcement Board. Yun ang ginagawa at nangyayari ngayon sa NAPOLCOM. You don't need lawyers. So any ordinary citizen can go to the NAPOLCOM, file his case, and we will hear it. So especially right now, we are revising Memorandum Circular 2016-002. Ito yung Bible ng lahat ng disciplinary authorities na may hawak ng police. So it's on my desk. We're just making certain edits. Paglabas noon, it is not technical. So it allows the ordinary guy magtataho, labandera to go to Napolcom without any lawyer, sabihin niya yung mga kailangan niya sabihin, and that case will proceed without any technicality.
At ikaw yung lalapitan.
Yes, correct. I mean, the whole National Police Commission. Yeah. Pero Napolcom is yung bintana, pinto, pader ay bukas para sa ordinaryong tao.
Because we do know that it's not just about filing cases here or holding them accountable, but it's also reliving wounds. So we better not make that journey expensive, right?
Walang gagastusin, Gretch.
All right. Maraming salamat sa iyo. Thank you for joining us today
Salamat,
and
Gretch.
for giving us the latest on the affairs of the police. We have NAPOLCOM Vice Chairman and Executive Officer Rafael Vicente Calinisan. Don't go away. More matters to discuss right after a quick break. Keep it here on One News. Welcome back. You're still watching Morning Matters here on One News. Now, joining us today is BBC News Chief Presenter Steve Lai with years of experience in journalism. Steve is here in the Philippines to share with us his journey and offer insights on defending truth in an era of growing misinformation. Good morning, Steve. Welcome to Morning Matters.
Yeah, good morning to you, Gretchen. Great to be here with you.
Oh, it's an honor to sit with you, and you are on the other side of things this time. But I think it's amazing, your journey, taking a look at that. You've had an impressive global experience. But before all of the broadcasting work, you were actually a professional athlete.
Well, I wouldn't go so far as saying a professional athlete. I know you were indeed a legitimate professional athlete, but I did play rugby for Brunei. I'm from Brunei. My father's Brunei, and I had the opportunity to represent Brunei for 2 years, playing for the national team. Yeah, it was a great time.
And how did you get on the hard news desk?
Yeah, so it's quite a journey, and it probably will be one that you might find quite familiar. So when I moved to Singapore in 2009, I wanted a complete career change. I used to work at the Economic Development Board in Brunei, a corporate job, and I'd always had a passion for sport, played rugby as we just mentioned, and I was sitting on the sofa with my wife, and she said, what are we going to do when we get to Singapore? What are you going to do when we get to Singapore? Because she had a job. She's brilliant. And I said, I was watching a sports show, ESPN Sports Center, and I said, that's the job I want. And when I got to Singapore, I was very fortunate that I won an online competition. And the first prize was to present on Sports Center, so on the show that ESPN did. And that followed up with some work. They liked what I did, and they offered me some part-time work. And then after doing that for a year and a half, I made the move to CNA, which is Singapore's broadcaster, as you might know. And I started as a producer, cutting packages, doing RVOs and voicing, and it took a while to do the voicing. You have to pass certain criteria. You have to show that you have the seriousness to, because I had a sports background, right, when it comes to broadcasting. So I had to cut my teeth, as a producer, work my way up, and I was at CNA for about 12 years, and over that 12 years I managed to cover a lot of breaking news stories, a lot of big events. I was actually here in the Philippines when Duterte.
So this isn't your first time?
This is my second time to the Philippines. The first time I came when Duterte won the presidency. I was here for about 2 weeks reporting on that story, and it was a wonderful experience at CNA.
And you worked with our colleague Regina.
Yeah, that's right.
At CNA.
Yeah, that's right. There's a lot of Filipinos that have passed through CNA. Timothy Go, another one as well, that was at CNA for many years. So yeah, there's been a lot of, I suppose, familiarity when it comes to the Philippines and stories here, and your political system is very interesting. To say the least. Yeah.
Well, how did you transition from sports to hard news? I mean, how was that process of discernment like for you?
Well, the skill set, I would argue, is the same. I mean, you're still telling a story. You're still informing the audience about what has happened. But it's just the content that is different. It's just the weight of the stories is obviously different as well. But in Singapore and in broadcasting, the sports jobs were diminishing, and news was something that was there and available. And I thought it would be something that I would be comfortable in or would see myself doing. And actually, I found that I really enjoy the weight of the job. I enjoy the responsibility. I find it very rewarding to work on news and big
I got
stories.
a feeling that you are a very competitive person. That's why this challenged you a lot. Am I correct?
You wouldn't be wrong. I guess it's the sports background and having always played sport. You always want to see if you can prove yourself, if you can push yourself. And coming from a sports background, which I'm sure you can relate to, going into hard journalism, I'm sure there were some skeptics out there whether or not you could make the change, whether or not you were serious enough or had enough responsibility to carry those stories. And like you
and
proved,
how did you deal with that?
Possible.
How did you deal with that?
Just do the work. Just be patient and do the work. The only way you can prove to people that you can do the job is to do the job. And over time, I guess I was able to do that.
And now you're a chief news presenter over at the BBC. You're anchoring Newsday.
Yeah, that's right.
At 9 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, thank you for taking your time out with
no
us.
problem. I was in Singapore for some other work meetings, and when this opportunity came up, I thought, hey, why not? A good chance to meet you and to see
so
more
you were with CNA for about 12 years, and then
right.
you moved on over to BBC for how many years now? 2
No, just 1.5 years actually.
One and a half years. What are the differences in terms of like the storytelling perspectives? Because CNA is mostly about Asia,
yes.
BBC is about the global stories.
Yes.
And what differences did you see in terms of like rigor and discipline?
Yeah, this is probably the question I get asked the most. What's the biggest difference between the two? And to be honest, there are more similarities than there are differences when it comes to the approach to journalism and the work they do, especially when it comes to regional stories. But it's just the scale and the scope that the BBC has is, another step up. BBC has the most journalists on the ground around the world for any news organization, and its speed and its determination to deploy people to stories is unmatched. I mean, I've been with the BBC for a year and a half, and I've had more deployments and traveled to more cities to cover more stories than I did in the 12 years that I was
So the
at
width
CNA.
and the depth that you can go.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
The resources are there also.
Yeah, well, the resources to deploy and to tell the stories is, but you guys have a lovely setup in this studio.
Thank you.
Many more people in the backgrounds that people can't see than we have in our BBC studio. It's a very Spartan, very lean crew.
Well, you were born in London, raised or you grew up in Brunei.
Yeah.
I think it's an interesting mix of perspective. You have both the Western and the Asian. How do you bring that together to tell a different kind of story?
Well, I guess one of the benefits of that, I mean, my mother is British and my father is Bruneian. So I grew up in a household where people had different points of view and different, not to say value systems, but different approaches to how they would do things. So ever since I was a kid, I've always been able to see both sides. I mean, both my parents might have a disagreement about something, but you can see where the intention is coming from is a good one, but how they deliver it is quite different. So in that regard, I've always felt quite comfortable looking for the other side when it comes to a story. And also, I've always been from somewhere else. Like as you mentioned, I was born in London, but I mostly grew up in Brunei. But I also spent some time in Australia when I was a kid, and wherever I've been, people have always been wondering where I'm from. I don't know if maybe I don't look like I'm from anywhere in particular, so I get asked this question quite a bit. So I always have felt a bit like the outsider wherever I have been, and that kind of lens or that kind of view with objectivity, I think, helps me do my job better.
Well, I ask that because at the center or forefront of the news these days is the war over in Iran.
Yes.
And the Western media has been criticized as slanted when it comes to the storytelling. How does BBC deal with what's happening over at the Middle East?
Well, the BBC is quite used to being criticized from all sides. When it comes to Gaza and Israel, both sides have accused the BBC of not telling the other side's side of the story. So, but what's most important for us is to try and tell the story from the ground up. So Lise Doucette, our chief international correspondent, she was able to go into Iran to be able to report from the ground there, which is incredibly difficult. Iran doesn't allow a lot of international media in, and one of the conditions that she was able to report from there was that what she produced or what stories that she did would not be shown in Iran on the BBC's Persian service. So there are a lot of restrictions. Even you'll know that journalists are not allowed into Gaza. Israel won't allow any independent international journalism to take place inside of Gaza. But BBC has a network of freelancers, a network of people that they trust in Gaza to be able to tell the story. So if you're watching the BBC News Channel and you see us doing all these compelling stories from within Gaza, and that's due to the hard work and the sacrifices that the people that we engage with, those freelance journalists that we work with closely, are able to provide for us. And that's one of the crucial things is, I mean, there's the political story, but there's also the human story that's happening.
So
on
you
the
try
ground.
to focus more on the
Yeah,
human
so
story.
you'll see when the BBC does stories, a lot of it will inevitably include the human aspect and what's happening to those people on the ground based on what's happening in the news conferences from world leaders and what they're saying.
How does the BBC deal with the words genocide, terrorist? Do you keep away from using those words?
Yeah, that's another thing that the BBC gets criticised for. But the BBC's job is first and foremost to inform viewers, and when people start criticising the BBC for the language that we use, then I guess we kind of think maybe we're on the right track with what we're saying or not saying. But it is a tricky one and one that we have.
So you don't use those words?
Depending on
I
mean,
context.
they are not it is not necessarily
Maybe
the BBC's view. Our job is to say, this country as labeled by this country. It's not for us to make those determinations.
Okay. I ask that because we are in an age of disinformation and misinformation, and so much vitriol has been going around online when it comes to what is happening over the Middle East.
Yep.
Not just in the Middle East, even here in the West Philippine Sea, the South China Sea. It has been a battle of narrative. How has the BBC adapted to that?
It makes the work that we do certainly more challenging. The journalism has to then be more rigorous. You need to be able to present the two narratives, but give context as to what they have said and what has happened. It also, in some cases, results in more resources having to be deployed to dispel perhaps those stories. I can give you an example. The US president had the South African president in the Oval Office, Cyril Ramaphosa, and was showing, he had all these news articles printed out about stories depicting persecution of white South African farmers in South Africa. Stories that had been largely discredited, but this was coming from the White House. He was presenting these stories. So, we have to report that as the news because it's the US president saying it. But we also then deployed one of our own reporters to the ground where those claims were being made to show and to interview people in the area to dispel or to correct or to reveal, the
truth behind it.
Yes, the truth behind it. But, it takes an incredible amount of resources
So,
and determination
there
to do
are special reporter fact checkers under BBC, is that correct?
Oh, well, I mean, any news organization will have that sort of thing.
It depends if the newsroom has more resources.
Yes, yeah. You laugh because I know that resources in newsrooms is something that's
well, the BBC
sensitive.
has its own disinformation unit
that's
called
right.
Verify.
Yeah, that's correct.
Is that composed of reporters?
Yeah, so that's like a team, like a task force, if you like, set up within the newsroom. Because in this day and age, as you well know, disinformation is so prevalent. And it used to be the case that it would be from anonymous postings on websites. Now it's coming from press secretaries and people in positions of power. So through BBC Verify, that team will look at certain stories and break down elements. They might look at satellite images, they might look at user-generated content and piece together a full story and reveal how we came to find this news. Because increasingly, if people want to believe what they see, then they want to see the working. They want to see how you came to those conclusions.
But isn't it like playing whack-a-mole nowadays?
Absolutely,
right?
absolutely. But it's a fight that has to be had, though, Gretchen. What's the alternative? We just stop? We just don't bother? I mean, we have to, editorial judgment comes into play with, do we commit resources to dispelling this? Do we commit resources to establishing whether that's a fact? I mean, it's a big challenge.
How fast do you correct, contentious claims? Because in the U.S., I remember it was a debate on how quick that should be done.
Yes.
Like, for example, in interviewing a politician, do you fact-check the politician right away as the politician speaks?
Yes.
Or do you wait for a certain period of time?
Yeah. That was something key during the debates, right? You're referring to like the U.S. debates, whether the moderators should interject and fact-check and correct. There's so many different opinions on whether or not that's the right way to go. But I mean, in an ideal world, you wouldn't need to fact-check people, but we don't live in that ideal world where it should happen. People need to be held to account, right? Need to be have either their words that they had said that completely contradict what they're saying now, or they need to be challenged, and that's the job of journalists to continue that fight wherever they happen to be.
Is there a conversation here with platforms, like because they're headquartered in Singapore, right? Is there an active conversation happening on the ground of anything that you know?
You mean like when you say like social media platforms?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the challenge that different countries have with social media platforms is that which laws do they have to bend to and to follow, and they're different in different jurisdictions. So I guess the challenge for every government is how much can they enforce when it comes to social media companies, and how much should social media companies be doing themselves as well to ensure that these falsehoods don't prevail or don't become so prevalent. Could social media companies be doing more? I think there are a lot of parents out there that would argue that yes, that would be the case.
Because Singapore has been, I think, one of the countries that has a law on fake news.
Yes.
The
Protection of Falsehoods and Manipulation Act, yes.
So are you affected by that law?
Well, that was established in 2019, and most of the the use cases for it have been, or were in the early days, used for COVID. When the pandemic hit, it was used as a way of cutting down quickly on false statements, misleading news, because it was a pandemic. There was a lot of need for news regarding vaccines, regarding healthcare to be nipped in the bud. But it doesn't affect, there are numerous international news organizations based in Singapore, not just the BBC. It doesn't really affect the work that we do. It's, I guess, something that the government wants to put in place to ensure that its citizens have accurate information. The most commonly used case for POFMA, as it's described, it's even become a verb. It's like you've been POFMA'd, that sort of thing. But is more like clarifications. So if someone posts on something online that's considered false and the government wants to take issue with it, they will usually give a direction to include a link to the government statement rebutting what that statement says.
Okay.
So there are
mostly about that.
Yeah, so there are various different levels of depending on how severe the falsehood is determined.
Because the government minister is allowed to take down online content that is against the public interest.
Yeah.
It seems it would be a broad category,
and
right?
that would be the question: who determines that, and where is that line drawn?
Is there a committee, a fact-checking committee?
In Singapore?
Yeah.
I would imagine so. But there are various different levels that it has to go through to establish that. Is that something that the Philippines is
We are looking
into?
at that. That is, I think, one of the issues being discussed in Congress before it adjourned the 19th Congress. But that is expected to be taken to the 20th.
Yeah.
A fake news bill is in the works because I remember the lawmakers saying the social media platforms are waiting for a specific law to adhere to because they were the ones encouraging it themselves. Okay. So they know what laws apply.
Yeah.
Right? But just been very curious about speech in Singapore. Because every time I go there, I have friends who tell me that you're not allowed to criticize government. Is that correct?
Criticize is also a broad definition.
Okay.
But I'm not here to talk about what can and can't be said in Singapore. There are freedom of speech is widely acceptable in Singapore.
You just have to be very careful.
Well, you have to back it up. They will challenge, the government will come and challenge you if you say something that they deem to be false.
Speaking of challenging, another thing that's challenging newsrooms is artificial intelligence. How is the BBC embracing or taking AI? Has it embraced AI?
Slowly. It's looking at it cautiously. It's looking at it there's so many use cases for it, whether it's transcribing audio. If you do an interview, instead of listening to it and typing out what was said, transcribing, AI can be used to just quickly type out the script from the interview that you've just had, to making sure that we keep everything above board when it comes to what goes out on air.
Because it is also being used now to write press releases, right? And even captions online. So the BBC has none of that.
Oh no, everything has to go through the eyes of an individual human being before it makes its way onto anything that comes out of my mouth, or whether it comes or goes on air or appears on the screen. Yeah, it's not got to the point where it's like automated, where the machines are running things and humans aren't present yet.
How much of a problem is AI being, when it comes to the topic of disinformation?
I think that the challenge is the speed at which it can move, and the speed at which and how much content can be generated. If you've ever typed in something to ChatGPT, whether it's to just write me a draft of a thank you letter to someone, and it takes you 15 seconds to write the prompt, but in 2 seconds you have like a full page of a letter. So the speed at which it can move is I think some of the challenge. But I guess like all technology, if it can be harnessed in a way that is beneficial for everyone, then you can't shy away from it. You just need to keep your compass, pointed in the right direction when it comes to your journalistic integrity with how you use it.
Well, I hope AI doesn't outpace fact checkers, but instead aid fact checkers.
Yes,
right?
that's right. That's right. I mean, we've even seen, you've probably seen them too, AI newsreaders. Is that something that concerns you, that it's going to come and take your job?
It's more of like the pool of information that it has and how much people are using or preferring to get their digests from AI rather than listen to actual newscasts. So that's what worries me.
Yeah, and it is, I think, something that's important to bear in mind when it comes to AI is the sources of its information. I mean, it is using huge large language models, huge data sets, but it's opaque, right? You don't know what it's saying is what it is or what is actually fact because you don't have access to what it knows and you can't always go inside it. I know increasingly AI platforms like ChatGPT, now they link articles to where it got its sources from. So if you ask it to produce like a write-up on some story, you can fact check where that information has come from, but that again needs intention.
But I also saw
work.
some data saying that that ChatGPT has actually lessened traffic to websites.
Yeah, absolutely, because people will just want an easy. This is my question. Yeah, this is my question.
I guess as a final question, how? What's your advice for the young journalists of today and newsrooms that need to keep relevant in this new age of disinformation, artificial intelligence, and how do we become like you?
Well, I don't know about the last question, but the first part of that question, I think, be curious. I mean, everything that comes out from good journalism is curiosity. It's the curiosity to know what's the story behind the story, or how did that information come to be, or what's the other side of that story. One event has happened, but there could be 3 different points of view as to what caused it. So being curious, I think, is probably the most valuable tool that any journalist will have. And not even, I wouldn't limit that to journalism. I would include that to be anyone. Like if you're on social media, if you're consuming your news through an AI platform, be curious. Don't just type in something and accept what you've been given. Don't just scroll through social media and take your worldview from a 10-second video clip. Be curious, find out more about it, and then the more informed you are, the better chance you have of not falling for fake news.
And watch BBC.
Yes, and watch Morning
If you're
Matters.
too lazy. Thank you so much for your time today and your insights on this new era for newsrooms. We have BBC News Chief Presenter Steve Lai. And that wraps up today's episode of Morning Matters. We hope we've given you the right start to your morning. Let's go ahead and make the day matter. My name is Gretchen Ho. We are One News, all sides, all the time.